I think we're streaming, members, so behave yourselves.
Yes, we're now live.
Okay, thank you, Jan. Streaming, members, so behave yourselves. Can I remind you all to mute your microphones until called upon to speak, please? Andy? Thank you.
Yes, we're now live.
Okay, thank you. Streaming members, so behave yourselves. Can I remind you all to mute your microphones until called upon to speak, please? I think it's looping through the YouTube, Jan. Andy?
I've lost my screen.
Thank you.
Yes, we're now live.
Okay, thank you. Streaming members, so behave yourselves. Can I remind you all to mute your microphones until called upon to speak? I think it's looping through the YouTube, Jan. Andy?
I've lost my screen.
Thank you. Groundhog Day is here.
It's certainly looping, Chairman.
I've lost my screen. I've lost my screen. I can't switch the
Groundhog Day is
YouTube off.
It's certainly looping, Chairman.
Press Control Alt and delete simultaneously. Can you just move? Thank you.
I've lost my screen.
Groundhog Day is here. Try that.
Have you switched the YouTube off?
Are we sorted?
Just had to get a man in.
No comment. Okay. So good evening, members, and good evening to any members of the public who are watching this meeting of the Town Council's Development Management and Licensing Committee meeting. We'll start in the usual way by going around the membership and confirming that you can all hear and that you're here. Starting please with Councillor Ellis.
Yeah, I can hear.
And Councillor Fay. Yep, thank you. Councillor Graham Parker.
I'm here and I can hear.
Councillor Mrs. Leslie Crawford.
Yes, I can hear.
Councillor Barry Smith.
I'm here and can hear.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Councillor Hutton.
I'm here and can hear.
Councillor Pete Squire.
Yes, can hear.
Madam Mayor Councillor Anne Johnson.
I'm here and I can hear you.
Councillor Alan Lewis.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening. And Councillor Alec Venning.
Yeah, I'm here and can hear.
Excellent. Thank you very much, all of you. So moving on to the agenda. As we are all here, I assume there are no apologies for absence, Jan.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Item 2 on the agenda is to confirm the accuracy of the minutes of the meeting held on Monday, the 25th of January. Are you all happy that they represent the meeting accurately? Okay, all happy to propose that they be accepted. Yep. Okay, thank you very much. Item 3, declarations of interest. Councillor Mrs. Johnson.
Thank you. I need to declare an interest for item 22121, which is the application for Mount Kelly. My son-in-law is employed there and him and his family all live on site.
Okay, thank you. Any other declarations of interest, please? Okay, usual rules, if you become beware of anything as we go through the agenda, please let us know as soon as you can. Thank you. Item 4 is Dartmoor National Park. We've not received any new items, but I think Graham has some feedback for us regarding the National Park local plan. Graham.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think as everybody knows, the plan's been submitted for examination. It was submitted last September, along with everybody's representations. Now, the inspector's been appointed. That's Mr. Barrett. He's decided that he needs further information on 11 issues. And he'll get that information from Dartmoor National Park and people and organisations who want to appear before him. Basically, he's called an examination and has asked these people to produce evidence. He'll lead a discussion on each issue. He'll then go away and write a report, deciding whether the local plan is sound or not. Now, he's published a timetable for the examination. I sent all of you a copy of that earlier. We're not appearing to give evidence, but it's being broadcast on YouTube. And I think it'd be very helpful for anyone who wants to get the feel of what an examination on a relatively small local plan, which that one is like, because that gives a real strong echoes of what a neighbourhood plan examination would be like if we ever got there. So, I mean, basically, I can get to the majority of sessions, so I'll be there listening in. But if anybody else would like to attend or view in any of the sessions, I've asked the programme officer to send me the link to YouTube, the sign-in details, and I'll pass them on to you as and when they arrive. So if you could just drop me an email, that's the easiest way of doing it. But it looks as though he's picking on some really interesting issues that will affect Tavistock as well.
Okay, thanks, Graham. Andy?
Are there any particular ones that you think we'd be more interested in?
That's a very good question, Andy. The answer is yes. I think the housing policies, particularly thinking back to the discussion we had over affordable housing last week, are going to be, that's going to be a very interesting day, and that's Wednesday, March the 3rd. The environment, all of the, I would have expected all the sustainability issues to come up there, but I think, as I said at the time when we discussed the local plan, those environment, ecological and sustainability issues were really very, very well laid out and very clearly laid out. It seems that the inspector's happy with what he's got on most of those, but it might just be worth looking in on the morning of Friday, March the 5th, when he deals with the environment, because Natural England is going to be there. The other issue is one that we've been fussing about, raising as an issue, is matter 8, which is settlement boundaries, and that's on Wednesday, March the 10th. Now, we're going to go through, I'm pretty sure, from what I see, there are 2 planning consultants attending and a developer, plus Natural England and the National Park Authority. So I think we're going to see both sides of the argument for and against settlement boundaries there. That should be very, very interesting. And then, I mean, the one that can be either, no, actually, it's not going to be a challenging one because nobody is appearing. I was going to say viability, but nobody's appearing, so nobody's challenging that. So those are the ones that I would pick.
Okay, thank you, Graham. Graham, can I suggest that you forward the link to Jan? And Jan, if you could send it out to all members of the committee, and then people can drop in and drop out.
Yeah, of course.
As they wish and as they're interested.
Okay.
But thank you for the highlights to the 2 particular ones that you think would be useful.
Okay, that's a pleasure.
Okay, great. Moving on to town planning issues. We haven't received anything, but I thought I would just report back to you that I spoke at the West Devon Borough Council DM&L committee this morning with regard to an application relating to 6 Tiddybrook Road, Whitchurch. You may recall that this was to convert a garage into a treatment room for sports massage therapy. And it had been called before the West Devon committee because the applicant's spouse is an elected member of West Devon Borough Council. We had objected to this application because of concern about the business expanding in a residential area, causing problems for local residents with increased traffic, parking, and so forth. However, after we had considered this application, and actually very, very recently, literally within the last few days, a long and detailed letter was received from the applicant's agents, setting out very, very clearly that there was no intention to increase the business. It is simply relocating from one room in the house to another room in the house, the new room being converted from the garage. And there were a number of reassurances enclosed in that letter that meant that the current situation hasn't changed or won't change, other than the applicant having a bit more room to work with her clients. I felt, and I did consult with James, I felt that the letter effectively overcame the objections we had made. Now, obviously, I couldn't come back to you and confirm that with you as a committee, but I spoke at the meeting this morning and I suggested that I was minded to think that had we had that information available at the time we considered the application, we would probably have come to a different conclusion. The bottom line is the application has been approved. The committee voted unanimously in favour of approval, so that has gone through. I was also going to speak at the application for some changes at 31 Glanville Road. And it's a long story, and I'm not going to go into it all here now, but for rather complex technical reasons, this was withdrawn from the agenda at short notice. I think we heard about it yesterday afternoon. And it is likely to come back to their next meeting next month for reconsideration. You'll recall that this is a positive building in the conservation area in the World Heritage Site. It is of such significance that a photograph appears of it in the conservation area management, no, character assessment, not the management plan, in the character assessment. And yet there was no heritage assessment attached to the application. We felt very strongly that there should have been one and have argued that. And anyway, for that and for other reasons, it has been temporarily withdrawn and will come back. So I'll provide you with an update on that in due course. So I have no other issues under town planning. And that takes us then to item 6, general correspondence. And I'm not aware that we've received any general correspondence. And item 7, urgent business brought forward at the discretion of the chairman. I have nothing urgent to bring before you. So we move swiftly then into agenda item 8, planning applications. And I'll just check that Jan is ready for me to go on.
Yes, that's fine.
Thank you. So 8A, decisions by West Devon Borough Council. There were 2 applications where we differed with the planning authority, and I'll draw your attention to those. The first one was application 195620 full, and this was an application for a proposed garage, erroneously linked to the old milking parlour, Higher Wilminstone Farm, Wilminstone. We oppose this on various grounds. The planning authority has granted conditional approval, but one thing that is different is that this garage does not relate to the old milking parlour, but to the barn conversion that is yet to take place and has been given the name Windfall. And apparently that changes everything. So permission has been granted, but apart from laying the concrete slab, they can't do anything until the barn conversion has been completed. So that has gone through. I don't know, Graham, whether you had any comments to make about that one. No.
None at all.
Okay. And then the other one where we differed was, again, Higher Wilmenstone. This was the barn Higher Wilmenstone. And the application was for a variation of a condition relating to the use of the property as a holiday let. The previous condition stipulated that it shouldn't be used for longer than 6 weeks in any one let, and that a register should be kept of those leasing the property, and that register should be available for inspection by local authority officers at reasonable times. The outcome is that the 6-week limit has been removed. However, they still have to keep a register, and they still have to be able to show that to local planning authority officers at reasonable times if requested. James, you look as though you want to say something.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, it was just with the previous one, the old milking parlour. I was just a little bit disappointed that of our 3 borough councillors in the North Ward, only one saw fit to make a comment on the application.
Yes.
And so I just found that a bit disappointing, to be honest.
Yes, okay, noted. Any other comments, Graham?
Yes, just to reinforce the comments that I made when we discussed this, that the condition as it was originally is a perfectly standard condition used all across the country and has years of court case testing behind it. I have no idea why the local authority would accept the removal of the 6 weeks limit. But there we are.
Indeed. Okay. Leslie?
Yeah, there was also the one above the old milking parlour, 12 Watts Road, which was a refusal, we supported that. So that was another one that differed.
Oh, sorry, you're quite right. Yes. And I'll confess, I haven't looked into that one. Have you, Graham?
Yes, I have. I would have raised that myself. Thank you, Leslie. Yeah, I mean, it is interesting that on that one, and I think you can draw a direct contrast with the Glanville Road one that you would have spoken at committee on today, Chair. On that one, the conservation officer believed that the extension that we felt was modest, subservient, of an appropriate scale, but most significantly on the back, the rear side of the building, i.e. not the main elevation, we felt that was appropriate. He didn't. He felt that it was a modern intrusion into a conservation area and World Heritage site. And on that basis, he refused it. Now, I mean, that falls under the heading of 2 authorities applying the planning balance differently. There will come times where we look at an application in a certain way, they look at it, are using the same evidence in another way and come to a different conclusion. I don't actually have a problem with the fact that they came to a different conclusion to us, because I think they came to that conclusion for the right reasons.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments before we move on? No, okay, thank you very much. In that case, can we move to 8B, new applications? And we start with 10 Ford Street, Tavistock, re-advertisement, revised plans, erection of 6 flats, 1 cottage and associated car parking, And this is on the corner currently occupied by the second-hand car dealership. So it is within the conservation area, it is within the World Heritage Site, so bear those in mind. And it is pretty much the first thing you see as you come down into Tavistock after you've passed the Catholic Church. So it is a very prominent site. So we want to be clear that whatever goes there is appropriate. This application is open for discussion, ladies and gentlemen. James.
This is the second time I've seen this application. I don't know if you've seen it before,
Yes.
the older councillors. Previously, we've objected to it for parking issues, road safety, and the size of it. Looking at the plans, my opinion hasn't changed from our last objection. And just delving in deeper into the report, Historic England, their report was quite damning about this design. Especially as to its location within Tavistock. So my proposal would be to object to this development.
Okay, any further comments, please? Leslie?
Yes, I'd agree. I mean, there were numerous objections. The height goes above Bitsford Lodge, and there were concerns about the building blocking the light of other buildings nearby. In fact, I believe it actually takes out 2 windows on the house that it's actually going to be built next door to. Drainage was an issue as well. So yeah, there were a lot of objections, including parking as well. So I would object.
Thank you. Any other comments? Graham?
Yes, Chair. This is one rather like James. When I started digging into this, I started making notes. I could hardly stop. I mean, the first thing to say about this is there is a heritage impact assessment, there's a planning statement, and there's a design and access statement. And every single one of those are completely irrelevant now, because it's not just a revised drawing, it's a completely different scheme. It's changed in virtually every respect. One wonders what's happened in the year since we saw it. We saw it at the end of 2019. Nothing happened during 2020, and here it is, notably, I think, with a different team. The previous team seems to not be on the application anymore. Now, the drawings all say, and I know I've got 1 or 2 little hobby horses. This is one that I've exercised with David Fairburn before. The drawings all say that they've been amended to reflect West Dereham Borough Council officers' comments. Now, somewhere in the public domain, those comments should be set out so that we and every member of the public can see what the officers are telling the applicant. Why did the applicant change the scheme from what it was before to where it is now? Because those changes aren't just tiny. There are changes to the massing. Now, Leslie's right, the previous scheme was above the level of Fitzford Lodge. This one drops the level to the same level as Fitzford Lodge, but it does it by completely altering the appearance of the roof. It depresses the roof as if somebody's jumped on it. The inclusion of balconies, for goodness sake, in this part of Tavistock, in a World Heritage Site, conservation area, and in the setting of listed buildings. I mean, Graham Lawrence at Watts Road, as I've just said, objected to the alien intrusion of a small extension to number 12 Watts Road. I mean, these are alien intrusions writ large. balconies are just not a part of Tavistock's character or of the World Heritage Site. The treatment of the corner of the development was specifically criticised by English Heritage or Historic England. James is right, the Historic England had two big comments. One was about that, and it seems to me that this is no better than the previous treatment. And it has to be said, if you read the heritage statement, which I have done, it sets out a brief for the architect. Now, at least you could see how the previous architect had tried to accommodate that brief. This one has torn it up and thrown it away. And so, I mean, there are so many issues with this in terms of heritage. Leslie's right, it looks like three of the flats are going to have a problem. Three of the flats in Fitchford Lodge are now going to have problems with overlooking directly into their bedrooms. And at least one of those leaseholders there has already objected. I think that's an objection worth supporting. I mean, James, I don't know whether you got the plan handy. I'm no driver, but I've designed and laid out literally hundreds of car parks. And it seems to me that two of the car parking spaces, it's impossible to enter and exit the building in forward gear. Now, the idea of somebody reversing into or reversing out of that building with a car is not something that I think we ought to be thinking kindly of. But there's a big issue that Historic England raised, that this application completely ignores. It points out that Tavistock is a designed town, and whoever at the time was laying the buildings in the town out was aware of the relationship between one building and another. And Historic England was very, very clear that there is a straight line from the Catholic Church through the Methodist Church, the URC, to St Eustatius, and that Chapel Street is incredibly important in the vistas in Tavistock. I mean, literally, you can see right the way along Chapel Street, straight to the Catholic Church. And what they said in their comment was that they were very, very uncomfortable that a building of this mass is put at the end of Chapel Street, potentially completely obliterating that important view. Now they related that to the character appearance of the conservation area, but also to the outstanding universal value of the World Heritage Site. And you could see, as James said earlier, Historic England were really, really worried about this building, and mainly about the massing in that view. So I'm with James, and if he was then proposing that we object, I would second that objection. I personally think that this design is actually a step backwards from the one that we saw before and that was withdrawn.
Okay, thank you, Graham. Does anybody else want to say anything? Pete.
I initially took it as an application I would be thoughtful about supporting, but I'm persuaded by the arguments presented that it is an intrusion in on the impact of buildings in Tavistock. So I withdraw my support from it.
Okay, anybody else? I actually thought it represented a slight improvement on what was being proposed before, in that the roof line is a little bit lower. The general appearance of the street elevation mirrors that of the Churchill development. And there has been a deliberate attempt to step down at the corner so that the height, once you've turned around the corner, is similar to the existing properties. So I felt that there were some benefits there. I take the point about the balconies. I think they are an intrusion. That's not a feature of Tavistock particularly, and certainly not a feature of the conservation area. I picked up the point about the line of sight between the various churches, and that isn't addressed at all in this application. I don't think it's even mentioned from what I remember. It appears in English Heritage's comment, but nowhere else as far as I can see. So I'm rather like Pete. I was feeling a bit more favourably disposed towards this, but having heard the discussion, I'm not convinced that I am anymore. So I think we've got a proposal, we've got a seconder. Does anybody else wish to say anything before we go to a vote? Graham?
Yeah, just a comment on what you just said, Chair. The Historic England is not the only person who picked up the line of sight issue. It's actually there in the original historic heritage assessment, right, saying that that is an important feature. Now, going back to there was something else that you said. The problem is that they put all these drawings in without any explanation, any amendments to the heritage assessment, to the planning assessment, or to the design and access statement. So we have no reason, we've got nothing to hook onto to understand why they've done what they've done. So, I mean, I understand why you might say that it's a step forward, but likewise, I'm kind of with Leslie in that I think it's a step backward. But there we are on that. But no, Historic England is backed up on that issue of the view by their own heritage assessor.
Okay, so final call for anyone who wants to say anything. In which case we'll go to a vote. The proposal is that we object to this application. If the vote is carried, then we'll then agree between us the grounds that we wish to specify in the objection. So all those in favour of objecting to this application, please show. And that appears to be unanimous, Jan. So the next step then is to compile the objections. Who would like to start that process, please? What a surprise. Graham.
As you know, Chair, I very often sit here and write the alternatives. What should the conditions be if we approve it, and what? So I've got one for both here. But yeah, object. I think the first thing is a reason that the proposal introduces an incongruous, overbearing building featuring balconies that clashes severely with the character and appearance of the conservation area and the World Heritage Site. Now, in that, I think we're echoing what Historic England said about the previous one and what Bill Horner said. I mean, he was concentrating on archaeology, but you know, I think up front we say that this is out of character. The second objection, I think we should draw attention in a way that it can't be forgotten, to the failure to address Historic England. So the second one I suggest is the applicant has done nothing to respond to Historic England's requirement to protect the views to and from the Catholic Church, also recognised in paragraph 5.1 of the heritage assessment.
Graham, do you want to spell out the line of sight of the churches?
No, I think just the reference to Historic England gets it better than I could ever do it.
Okay.
Actually, I see what you mean. You know, just along Chapel Street. I think if we say along Chapel Street, which is the reference point that's in Historic England, I take your point, Chairman. Yes. The third one, although I'm not a driver, I'm pretty confident about this one. The car parking layout does not facilitate all cars entering and leaving the highway in forward gear. And that's basically the two cars at the far end. You can't get any kind of turning circle to do a 2 or 3 point turn. So if you're going in forward gear, you've got to come out in reverse gear. Sorry, did somebody want to, did I hear somebody saying something about that?
I don't think so.
No, I may be wrong, but I don't think I am. Number 4, just reinforcing the residents of Fitzford Lodge, the proposal will have a harmful impact on the residents of the adjoining Fitzford Lodge by virtue of overlooking. Incidentally, there's an issue there that will reflect on something that needs to be said about a later application. I don't think I'd certainly not noticed that on Fitzford Lodge that windows had been put in the bedroom overlooking this site. Now that was a mistake. It's not just bad practice. It was at one time contrary to regulations to have windows overlooking your neighbour's land. And the reason is that you end up with problems like this.
Okay.
Okay, the fourth, yes, there's 2 of us just reflecting what we have objected to the first time. The proposal contains no proposed contributions to open space, education, or public transport. Now, somebody asked me earlier about the the threshold for affordable housing. The threshold for affordable housing is 11 units. So this development falls below that threshold. And then the final one is the proposal contains no provision to widen the road fronting the site. Now, those last 2 were part of our original objections and they haven't changed. And I wonder, Chair, whether, rather, as well as the objection, we just urge West Devon not to determine the application until the supporting documents have been updated, and urge the local authority to reconsult Historic England as Historic England themselves requested. I can see both of those slipping by. It wouldn't be the first time that's happened in the last few months.
Okay, members, you've heard what Graham has suggested as the comments. Leslie?
Thank you. And yeah, I did raise the bit about light, blocking some people's light. And there is one of the objections, and I think it's for number 9, I'm just trying to look it up, was that this would, I'm not sure about if it actually does or not, but that it would block off the light from two windows in that house, number 9, so that there would be no natural light going into that house. Is that not a ground?
It would be. I'm sorry, Leslie. I didn't I didn't pick that one up.
I'm just trying to find it. No, it's not that one. Sorry, can't find it now because there were quite a few objections. That's that one. Number 9. No, I'm not quite sure what the date is on this one. The structural integrity of 9 Ford Street is at risk due to the plans showing foundations and walls being built within 1 metre of the existing sidewall. A full structural survey must be carried out to determine safety. The plans show the new semi-detached cottage built directly onto 9 Ford Street, which would cover 2 small windows and cut all natural light from 2 rooms in number 9, thus making them unusable. And they go on to talk about, again, privacy, because these cottages had an open southwesterly aspect. Turn these dark little cottages into light. This open aspect to the south turns dark little cottages into light and airy properties with glorious rear gardens. The proposed block of flats would completely obliterate this open aspect, shielding the rear of the cottages from light and replacing it with a vertical 3-storey wall containing 12 windows across the entire expanse of what is currently open skies. I'll just check what the date is on that one. That came up in 2019. So that was before the last one, but I would suggest that still stands.
Well, certainly I've got Google Earth up Street View, and there are 2 small windows on the side of number 9 that would be covered by the extension. I don't know what rooms they are tiny, but I don't know what rooms they cover. But yeah, I mean, if members felt that was an issue, we could certainly add that on. As to the open aspect, this is a site that's been developed before, and I don't think that we would strengthen our position by adding in that a block of flats in this location would prevent views of open sky from gardens. But certainly the window one is a matter of direct residential amenity.
I don't suppose it's a material planning consideration, but if they're going to try to build onto the end of number 9 and in the process obliterate a couple of small windows, they're going to get into all sorts of difficulty with party wall agreements, aren't they?
Yeah, as Leslie was saying it, and as I was looking at it, I suddenly wished that I was a party wall and rights of light surveyor. I could make a fortune out of this case. You're right.
Mm.
It does it because it looks as though they've not consulted.
Yeah.
Sorry.
One of the things I'm thinking of is we've got 6 apartments or flats with 6 parking spaces. The cottage that is on Ford Street that's going to go onto the existing buildings, does that require a parking space under present legislation?
No. No, and we'll be coming back to that with another application.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay, so members, are you happy that we submit our objections supported by the arguments that Graham has put before us? Yes, you're all happy? Okay, Jan?
Can I please just ask, are we adding the final point about the light to number 9?
I think we should. I think if they're planning to obliterate somebody's windows, even if they are only 2 small windows, that needs to be flagged up.
Would somebody like to frame that one for me, please?
Graham? You're muted.
Would be that the proposal removes natural light from the side windows of number 9 Ford Street are causing harm to their residential amenity.
Okay,
Thank you.
right. I think we've given that one a good innings. All happy for us to move on? Thank you. In which case we now move on to 15 Newtake Road, Whitchurch. Household application for proposed porch. Okay, any comments? Anybody concerned about it? No, in which case, are you all happy to support? Please show. Thank you very much. Right, so now we move on to 48 Plymouth Road. Listed building consent for accessibility and safety improvements. And I think if I remember correctly, it looks as though the people who have taken over this building have got themselves in a bit of a pickle because they didn't appreciate that the listing applied to the whole of the building and everything within the curtilage. And they thought it only applied to those features specifically listed in the, specifically cited in the listing. And now they've started some of the work and they need to get permission for it. Do you have any concerns about this application other than the process, Graham? James first, actually. Sorry, Graham, if you don't mind. James?
Yeah, I looked at this. A lot of the stuff that they want to do, because it is going to be a care home, they need to do. One thing I didn't like, I couldn't believe a national company didn't know that they couldn't remove doors from the listed building. And actually, the report that goes alongside this application alludes to the fact that they've hurriedly put them into storage in a humidity-controlled environment, and that they could, if required to, get them back out, make them fireproof and refit them. So that's what I would like to see happen with this application. I'd like the original doors to be made fire safe and refitted. Everything else, I didn't really have an issue too much, but my big one was the doors.
Okay, thank you. Any further comments on that? Graham?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I mean, this time it's a listed building. Again, I think we should keep hammering away at this point because I think we're beginning to win it, but regretting the absence of a heritage statement. But on the basis of the information that's in the application, I can't see any objection to it. I agree with James, though, that passing a comment that we would like to see the original doors reinstated is worthwhile making.
Okay. So I think where we're at then is that we support this application subject to the original doors being appropriately treated to make them fire retardant and reinstalled. And anything else? Do we want to specifically mention the heritage statement? Can anybody remember when this application first came through? Was it accompanied by a heritage statement then?
I think it was one of those that we made a similar comment on. Whether or not we put it through to West Devon, I don't know. Okay. I don't recall a heritage statement on it.
Right. Okay. So, members, do you want to mention the heritage statement, or shall we just stop at the doors? What do you want to do?
I would, because I think we're beginning to win that argument.
We're confident that there hasn't been one, are we? I haven't been.
No, I've looked at it.
I haven't got the application up in front of me at the moment. Okay, we'll regret the absence of a heritage statement.
Thank you.
If we're all happy with that.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes. Is that Leslie? Are you supporting or asking a question?
Yeah, no, I'm supporting. I just think if we put in about the heritage statement, it might help them to look at anything else other than the doors, you know, because people don't necessarily, they did say they hadn't realised it. So there was quite a list, I think, within that. I can't remember them all, but I think it would just help to keep them on their toes, really, about everything they want to do and just thinking about whether that fits in with it or as it's a listed building or not.
Okay. James, did you have something else you wanted to say?
No, I think what we're doing is entirely right, supporting but drawing attention to the doors getting refitted and a heritage statement.
Okay.
Absolutely fine, thank you.
Fine. Shall we leave it at that? Yeah, okay. Okay, so we've got another resubmission here. So this is land to the rear of 3 Brook Street, Tavistock. So you remember this is behind what was the White Hart and is off Paddens Row. And Tony, you've got your hand up.
Yes, if you remember rightly, we objected first time on the basis of an overdevelopment. There were lots of other issues as well. One is that I'm not sure that the guy from the drawing has actually seen the site. He implies that the retaining wall for Old Exeter Road is straight. It's far from it. It's like about 2 foot from the bottom to the top of the parapet. There also is another section right in the middle of the second property, or the one looking at it on the right, which is actually a buttress, which is about 6 foot high and comes out about another foot. I noticed they've now put a bin store in. I went to see the site again today. Well, that bin store is exactly where the propane bottles are for, I don't know what that little cafe is. It's on Paddens Road, mine. That's where their propane bottles are. The drawing is actually quite inaccurate dimension-wise. One of the other issues we had was that the 2 gable end windows on the left-hand property overlooked the wall into the Pearl Assurance car park, which could then affect their applications in the future for any residential on that patch of land. Graham pointed out to me as well that there's no indication of where water will go from the small pitch going towards the Old Exeter wall, which is, and on a day like today, is constantly weeping. So what provision is going to be, not for their building, I'm not that fussed about that, but for the wall itself, which is obviously clearly a very, very large retaining wall. There's also a gas main that goes 3/4 way up that wall. And there are 2, bizarrely, which is really have to expand the drawing up, 2 Velux windows on that small slopey bit towards the Exeter wall. Well, they would have to be operated internally by a mechanical device. And what is their purpose? Because if they're to let in light, it's north facing, shielded by the wall. And if anyone looks over the wall, they're looking straight into their bedroom. So they'd either have to have a blind on them all the time. So there's lots and lots of things that are wrong with it. And they said that the model and the drawing doesn't give any indication of where water will go off that rear slope, and not be constantly damp or the wall get in trouble in the future. Those are the sort of things that came up, a lot of which was, okay, admittedly the site's smaller now, but I still object quite strongly. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. On the positive side, they have pulled it off the wall of the back wall of Mime. So they've taken away the problem of the ventilator exhaust there. One of the things that strikes me is how on earth do you get a vehicle in there? And to get a vehicle in there, you've got to go through the archway at the bottom of Paddens Row, then do a hard left in a narrow space to go into this, we'll call it a courtyard, and then a hard right to get anywhere near the building. Now, they're not proposing any parking, but I'm just thinking about the construction. How on earth do you get building materials in there? Graham?
You crane them in from Old Exeter Road.
Right.
That's the only way you can build it.
One way or another, during the construction phase, there's going to be some obstruction to the flow of traffic, whether they come in from the Brook Street end or from Exeter Road, Old Exeter Road. It's going to be a problem. Barry?
You can drop materials over from the car park behind the building at the top of Elbow Lane. You can park in the car park there and just drop them straight over the side wall with a HIAB. I had a look last week, and it's viable to do it that way. Whether they get permission is another thing, but they can do it.
It could be done. Yeah. Okay. Well, James.
Yeah, one of the things the application pointed out as well is they were quite clear that there was no requirement for car parking because this was central to the town and there's parking elsewhere, etc. And then in the next breath, they're saying that these are perfect starter homes. Now, if there's a young couple out there that don't at least share one car between the two of them, I'd like to meet them to wonder how they're getting about. So you can't say it's a starter home and not provide parking, because that is modern living.
Okay. Thank you, James. Graham.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I agree with so much of what Tony and others have said. I mean, first of all, there is so much wrong with the application drawings themselves. The application says it's a single story. The drawings show that it's 1.5. The drawings say that there are going to be render walls, but there's no indication of where that render is. It doesn't show the existing buttress, as Tony says. So, I mean, that will have a severe impact on the building of the property. It seems to show a hung slate gable towards the Prudential car park. Now, that's not mentioned on the application form at all. There's no roof plan. So, as Tony says, it's not obvious, but there are going to be two roof lights underneath Exeter Road. There's no indication as to how the retaining wall is to breathe or weep, and that's really important. There's a row going on at Banwell Street now, where exactly the same, only this time the houses are being built on the top of a retaining wall, and it's the Banwell Street residents who are worried about who's going to have to maintain that wall. Now here, there should be Section 106 agreement indicating who is going to, first of all, a structural survey showing how the water that currently weeps out of that wall is going to continue. Because if it doesn't do that, then you're backing up water behind a retaining wall, and that will affect the properties on Exeter Road. But the other one is who's going to maintain that wall? Because the general rule is that the person who gets the benefit from the retention, i.e. the one below, is the one retaining it. Now, those have to be sorted out. We're still in a position that one of the properties, the one on the left as we look up, will have no natural light at all on the ground floor, because it's got, except through the front door. The roof lights will allow you to lean over the wall at Exeter Road and look straight down into 2 bedrooms. The bedroom facing the Prudential car park, remember what we were saying about Fitzford Lodge? That is exactly the same problem. As soon as the owners come to develop the Prudential car park, and they will, then you're putting a constraint on that neighbour. And James is right to pick up the fact that there's no cars. That's right, but there's no cycle parking either. I mean, I think that they've really they've tried hard, but they haven't yet got the point that anything perhaps over one dwelling here is overdevelopment. It's causing them, every time they try and solve a problem, they're creating another. So, yeah, I still believe that they've not got there yet. And I would propose that we continue to raise an objection to it, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Is there a seconder for that? Yep, several by the looks of it. Okay, in which case we'll take a vote on that. So the motion is that we object to this application. If this is carried, that we'll then agree the supporting arguments. So all those in favour of rejecting this proposal, please show. Okay, and again, that seems to be unanimous. Thank you. And okay, can we now then define our arguments? What do we feel is the most important? Graham.
I suggest two objections. First, this is an incongruous building featuring render, picture windows, and roof lights on both faces of the roof. It neither protects nor enhances the character and appearance of the conservation area and the World Heritage Site. And the second, the absence of natural light to one of the houses, the absence of cycle parking, overlooking of neighbouring land, and lack of usable open space. I don't know whether you noticed, colleagues, that the front, what appears to be the front garden, is actually the stormwater retention tank. And so usable open space, that this is an overdevelopment of the site. Then I think we can add in, as we did, I think, on the previous one, thus it is contrary to policies, shall we all say this in unison, Dev 10, Dev 20, Dev 21, and Dev 29 of the local plan, and section 16 of the NPPF. Now, Chair, this is one where it may well be that the local authority decides to approve it. I can see that there might be a case. But so could we add an advice here to the effect that if, however, the Borough Council is inclined to approve, then we urge that no permission is granted until the impact of the development on the retaining wall has been determined and appropriate measures taken to secure its future. Because if they don't get that right, then that's going to cause harm to neighbours above and to either side. So I think it's now is when we should be flagging that one up.
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad you said that. I mean, the thing that gives me the heebie-jeebies about this application is the fact that it sits at the bottom of one of the biggest retaining walls in Tavistock. And we already know that it's got faults because it's leaking, it's weeping.
It's designed to.
Yeah, sure. And if that isn't properly managed, then the whole blooming lot could end up coming down, causing damage and, God help us, injury or worse to people in the house below, and part of new old Exeter Road disappearing down into the void below, causing all manner of problems up there too. So that's the thing that really, really worries me about this application. I mean, I don't disagree with all the points about it not looking very good in the conservation area, but frankly, nobody's going to see it because it's tucked away in a courtyard. But everyone's going to be affected if that blooming lot comes down. So we definitely do need to make sure we mention it. James.
Are we able to draw attention to the fact that the heartache this is going to cause those businesses in Paddons Road while it is under construction, and potential disruption to Old Exeter Road? Because it's not going to be a 5-minute drop off of, half a dozen breeze blocks. It's going to be days and weeks of absolute hell.
You're muted, Graham.
Yeah, I wouldn't have any objection to adding that to my suggestion.
No.
Sorry, I've got sore throat disappearing, voice disappearing.
Okay. Right, so where have we got to? We're adding to it then severe concerns about the integrity, current and future, of that wall, and who's going to be responsible for maintaining it or repairing it if the need arises. And we're also going to express concern about the disruption caused by construction and delivery traffic, both in Paddens Row / Brook Street and on Old Exeter Road during the construction phase.
Yep.
Okay, are you all in agreement with those points that we're making? Yeah, okay, thank you. Again, I'll just wait for Jan to give me the nod that she's ready. Thank you, Jan.
Whilst waiting for Jan, Chair, can I just say that the point you made about if you can't see it, does it do any harm? That's the tree falling in the centre of a forest and nobody there to hear it argument. The courts don't like that argument.
Okay.
No building and no space is entirely invisible. And this one is, of course, is visible from over the wall at Exeter Road.
Okay. Happy for us to move on? Barry, have you something to say, or are you happy for us to move on?
What I was going to say is that the fact that there's no parking down there, although there is a car park next door, because people have, on Old Exeter Road, have allocated parking spaces, or they purchase parking spaces behind the Prudential building. If you put buildings down there, you are going to put pressure on the parking that's available in Old Exeter Road, because they'll park up the back and walk down through Paddens Row on the steps. That's another area that the fact it's in the middle of a town and you're putting in cycles, as it was said earlier, people have 1 or 2 cars per dwelling. That's the way it's going to go, and that's going to put a load onto the available things. I know you can go down to the car park at the end where the co-op is, but if it's free, they'll park on the roads and cause problems up there. That was it.
Okay, thank you. Graham?
Yeah, just to say, Chair, that I mean, I've always taken the simple view that if you want to live in the centre of town in a historic area, in a conservation area, and there's no parking available, and you want to have a car, then buy somewhere else. And I think that's got to be the way it is.
Yeah. Okay. I think we've put some good arguments forward to oppose that application. Let's move on. And we go to Tavy Signs Limited, 1820 Tavistock Retail Park, subdivision and change of use from A1 to Unit 1 Class B2 and Unit 2 Class E. Do you have any comments, members? Andy?
I don't think they were changing the actual outside of the building at all, were they? So I'm quite happy with this.
Okay. Any other views? Graham? And you're muted again. That's another pound in the pot.
Excellent. Yeah, Ed Pearce is obviously getting too much work, because if you read the label, the front sheet of his planning statement, you'll find that it's a planning statement for a change of use to a kennel and a cattery. And there's an analysis of the kennel and cattery on page 5 of the planning statement as well. There's always a problem when you use a report from one job as a template for the next. The only question, Chair, and I want to make it clear that I've got no objection to this at all, is that Class E is a very wide class, and it includes uses. You are permitted to issue permissions that restrict uses within Class E. So there is it's a shop at the moment. It's a retail operation, is its lawful use. So you can't object to an A1 use, obviously. It's in an industrial area, so you can't really object to or any of the light industrial or office uses, and they'll be small scale. But is this a place where we'd be happy for a restaurant? Is this a place where we would want to encourage a creche or any of the other uses in Class E? I'm only raising that as a question for members to consider, because if you have any objection to any of those uses being located there, then this is the time to say it, because it can be dealt with by the local authority by condition.
Yeah, thank you, Graham. I have to say the same or similar thought went through my own head, and I actually wrote down, is this appropriate for Pixon Lane? Perhaps it would help members if I read out to you the range of activities that can be included under Class E. And it goes from E brackets little a all the way up to E brackets little g brackets 3 brackets. So there's a whole heap of stuff in here. So it starts off, and I won't give you which little letters they are, I'll just read the list of activities. But it includes display or retail sale of goods other than hot food, sale of food and drink for consumption mostly on the premises, provision of financial services, professional services other than health or medical services, or other appropriate services in a commercial, business or service locality. Indoor sport, recreation or fitness, not involving motorized vehicles or firearms, you'll be relieved to hear. Provision of medical or health services, except for the use of premises attached to the residence of the consultant or practitioner. Creche, day nursery or day centre, not including a residential use. Uses which can be carried out in a residential area without detriment to its amenity. Offices to carry out any operational or administrative functions. Research and development of products or processes. Industrial processes. So it's a big range of activities. And as Graham is saying, do we feel that any of those are particularly inappropriate for Pixon Lane, given that Pixon Lane is effectively the only designated employment site in the JLP? I think that's correct, Graham, isn't it, at the moment? Yeah. Leslie, then James.
Can I just clarify? It's not Pixon Lane, is it? It's behind Tesco's. So it's, Graham's trying to say something. So it is slightly different.
Right. Yes, you're quite right. Yeah.
Yes, that's what I was trying to say. Sorry.
Yeah, and also there have been, I think it was at the top of Pixon Lane, there was a gym at one time, and on another industrial estate was the children's soft play park. So I think, you know, there is room possibly for all of those other things that you've mentioned. I can't actually imagine many people would necessarily want to open a restaurant there because it's very hidden, it's off the beaten track, unless you've got a specific clientele. It's just my thoughts really, so I've got no objections to it in terms of that.
Okay. James?
I think, you know, we banged the drum very loudly as a council, complaining about not having 18,500 square foot of light industrial on Vistry and Bovis.
Baker.
Not Bovis.
Baker.
Baker. There's so many in this town. Yeah, Baker Estates. The joint local plan gears Tavistock towards being self-sustaining with local businesses. I think if we've got local businesses that want to do stuff on industrial estates, as long as it's legal, we should be supported.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments, please? So I get the feeling that there's no appetite for asking the planning authority to rule out any of these subclasses. Am I correct? Okay, looks as though you're all agreeing pretty much. I think Graham might be keeping his powder dry, either that or he's frozen. Okay, in which case I think we're in a position where we're happy to support this application. Is that correct? Yep. Okay, thank you. Right. The next one is the milking parlour, Higher Wilminston Farm. Householder application for erection of a porch. Does anybody have any concerns about this application, please? Okay, Graham.
Yeah, again, I've got no objection to this, but Ed must have been getting very, very tired here because the site is described in his design and access statement as the Thurlston Hotel, Kingbridge.
Okay, right. I don't think it's a material planning consideration.
Well, I don't know.
Yeah, okay. It struck me that this was a modest proposal, not a fundamental change, and I couldn't see any reason to object to it personally. Do you all agree? Yeah, okay, so we're happy to support that, please. All right. So the next one is Mount Kelly College. Proposed conversion of the redundant squash courts into additional classrooms and sports administration offices. This doesn't involve very much in the way of external changes to the building, but it does involve inserting a new floor inside where the squash courts currently are. And I think, if I remember correctly, the ground floor would be used for offices, mostly related to the swimming activities, and the upper floor would be a couple of classrooms and I think a storage area. This was accompanied by the most remarkably complete heritage statement, which I think extended to about 4 or 5 documents. I learned quite a lot about the history of Tavistock reading that lot. Does anyone have any concerns about this application, please? Andy, were you expressing the wish to speak or just, yeah, okay. In which case, Graham?
Yeah, I just want to associate myself with your comments about the heritage statement. I think it's an absolutely superb piece of work. And others, I mean, Kate Price is a very well-known conservationist in the business. She knows her stuff, and that is superb. I mean, it's an imaginative reuse of a building, and it would be hard to find anything to say against this. I think it's a superb application.
Yeah, okay. I'm inclined to agree. Does anybody have any contrary views? In which case, we're all happy to support this. Okay, good. Thank you. So we support. Jan, can we compliment them on the very comprehensive heritage statement, please? The heritage, I'm just having a senior moment. What's the word I'm looking for? Assessment.
Heritage impact statement.
Heritage, yes.
Impact assessment. Sorry, now I'm having a senior moment.
Yeah, heritage impact assessment. Please compliment on what a splendid piece of work that was.
Funny enough, Chair, I only said to Ginny just before the meeting that I'm beginning to see 1 or 2 really good heritage statements. If we put them all together as a compendium, we will be able to get a really detailed history of Tavistock.
Yes, absolutely. It's an easy way of doing it, isn't it? Right. Next one. 13 Mowens Park, householder application for rear extension. Does anyone have anything to say about this application, please? All happy to support it? Okay, thank you. We support that application. Ten Shelley Avenue. Application to determine if prior approval is required for a proposed single-storey rear extension extending 6 metres beyond the rear wall, maximum height of 4 metres and 2.5 metres at the eaves. I think this is all about knowing what your permitted development rights are and how it relates to the size of the building and all of that sort of stuff. Graham, James first, sorry, then Graham, please. And yes, go on, James and Graham, that order.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm not sure why this has come before us, because surely it's down to the planning authority to let them know whether they need prior approval or not. So I just think we have a neutral view and leave it.
Yep, thank you. Anne?
Yeah, I'm totally puzzled why something like this is coming before us. It's up to the planning authority to say whether or not they need to get prior approval, not us. They're the planning expert.
Yeah, well, I was interested in James's comment. I must say I regard this as a rather technical question, and I also have recorded that I feel we should take a neutral position and leave the LPA to make the decision. Graham?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, because this comes under the heading of certificate of lawfulness, and the certificates of lawfulness are based on evidence. It just happens that this is a class of those certificates where the only evidence is an assessment against the permitted development order. It would need somebody to, at the validation stage, to decide which type of certificate of application it is, and should it come to us. I understand how it's got here. It's got here by default. Yeah, I agree with James, but for what it's worth, it is PD. But yeah, there's nothing we can add to it.
Jan?
Would you prefer, if in future when I receive these, that I don't add them to the agenda?
Members, what do you think? Graham?
Personally, I think that if anything comes from West Devon, it is safer if it does come to us. I mean, because sooner or later, something, you know, we'll miss one that we wished we'd seen.
It's very quick to deal with them, isn't it? So yeah, can you continue to pass them through, Jan, please?
I think so.
Okay, and then we come to Boots Maisonette, 6A Duke Street. Removal of the redundant chimney stack down to roof level and replacement of defective timber sash windows with PVCU windows. And just to remind you, this is within the conservation area, it's within the World Heritage Site, and is designated as a positive building within the conservation area, appearing in green on the designation map. Open for discussion. Anne?
Yeah, I wasn't very much in favour of replacing the windows with the PVCU windows. I thought if the wooden windows need replacing, then they need to be replaced with like, and I'm sure now timber can be treated in such a way that it doesn't rot as quickly as perhaps it did in the past. Taking down the chimney stack, it's probably a really important thing in that area. That could probably be dealt with in a conservation way as well, I think. I wasn't in favour of this application.
Okay, James?
When I looked at this application, my first thought was a big company like Boots aren't going to spend money unless they really need to. And they're spending money to protect the building. So the first thing they're doing is protecting the building, removing the chimney stack. They wouldn't pay to do that unless they had to. And replacing timber windows with PVCU. Their dry rot argument sat well with me. The design of the PVCU windows was good. And when we look throughout Tavistock, we've got PVC, UPVC in World Heritage Site buildings throughout Tavistock, throughout the conservation area, and where they are, they're not direct line of sight. I haven't got an objection to the windows. If it was on the front of the building, I would be minded to object. On the rear where they are, I've got absolutely no objections. I believe we should support this application.
Okay, thank you. Any other views, please? Graham?
I have to say I'm entirely on Anne's side here. First of all, they say it's not visible from any other heritage asset. It is. It's visible straight down between the buildings. You can see the whole, pretty well that whole facade from Exeter Road. That chimney sticks up like a, not like a sore thumb, because it's a feature, and it's a feature that's up and down that road. They argue, and this is an argument that I've seen before, and that the government has seen before, and that basically everybody in planning has seen before, that the removal of the chimney is necessary to maintain the property. Why does the chimney need removing? What is the problem? Ingress of water. Why is water ingressing? Well, it's because the chimney hasn't been maintained. This is a large company. They don't spend, you're right, James, they don't spend money on things until they have to. Well, I'm afraid my view is that Boots have control and responsibility for a positive building at a World Heritage Site. They have a property management and building maintenance company tasked with looking after the building, and they haven't done so. So now, can I just read to you, when I say that we've all heard this before, paragraph 191 of the National Planning Policy Framework says, where there is evidence of deliberate neglect or damage to a heritage asset, the deteriorated state of the heritage asset should not be taken into account in any decision. In other words, we can ignore the issue about the state of the chimney. Anne is right. That is part of a positive heritage asset, visible from other places, the conservation area, and their duty is to maintain it. Now, in accordance then, setting that aside, if they want to demolish any part of a non-designated heritage asset in the conservation area, then the conservation area management plan is very clear that you should provide a full structural surveyor's report to demonstrate that there's no alternative to removal. And I am absolutely with Anne that their duty should be to preserve that chimney, and we should object to that. Now, the second thing is, they argue that the UPVC is the best solution because it isn't susceptible to dry rot. Now, I'm not in the business of suggesting to any reputable company that they may be wrong, but I do think that in the same way that a structural survey should be required before we agree to support the removal of the chimney, I think we ought to have a dry rot survey of that building to see whether there's no alternative to the removal of those windows. Why do I say that? Well, I've lost half a house. My very first house was riddled with dry rot, and I know how dry rot spreads. And if dry rots have spread to every single window on that facade from a leaky chimney stack, then it's in that building. It'll be in the walls, it'll be in the floors, it'll be in the ceilings, and that building is in deep, deep trouble. So I think, as a matter of urgency, somebody ought to be providing a dry rot survey. It may well be that it's wet rot, in which case that's a completely different kettle of fish. But I've been in Tavistock on DM committees now. This is my 6th year, and I really I despair when I hear, well, UPVC is okay because we've allowed it somewhere else. Somebody has to draw the line, because what the Conservation Area Management Plan says is that UPVC is neither visually acceptable nor sustainable. And in planning terms, in conservation areas, it ought to be unacceptable. So I view my approach to this is the same as Anne's. I would happily support Anne if she wanted to move an objection.
Okay, thanks, Graham. Any other views, please? Okay, so it sounds though we do have a proposal to object to this application, and it sounds though we have a seconder. So before we move to a vote, does anyone else wish to debate it further? Pete?
Superficially, I support the application, and that's where I would stand.
Okay, do you want to say any more about that?
Nothing that would be sufficiently helpful.
Okay, and Tony?
Yes, yes, the back of that building is viewable from the old Exeter Road, but at probably about 70 metres. And the brochure that I looked at that they supplied with their documentation, I thought the sash windows looked as similar as a sash window if you were looking at them from 5 feet away. And then, of course, there's the future maintenance and the accessibility to the back of that building to not have to keep painting them.
Okay, so we do have a proposal. It is seconded. The proposal is that we object to this application because it's a heritage asset. It's not listed, but it is designated a positive building within the conservation area, within the heritage site. And what is being proposed, it does fundamentally change the appearance of the back of the building, particularly the loss of the chimney. I think we go to a vote. Those in favour of the motion to object, please show. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You happy with that, Jan? Can you show again, please? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in favour. And those opposed, please show. That's 2, and abstentions. And that's 2. Alec, I'm sorry, you're rather in the shade there. I couldn't see what your position was on that one. You're supporting it. Okay, so that's 7 for the motion, Jan.
Right, so we're objecting.
We're objecting.
Okay, can you just reiterate the basis on that?
Okay, I think we're objecting. Correct me if I get this wrong, Graham, but we're correct. We're objecting on the grounds that the application fundamentally changes the appearance of a designated positive building within the conservation area and World Heritage Site without good justification. What else do I need to say?
That is fine for the first reason. I'll wait for Jan, and then I'll suggest a second. Yep. Could I suggest that the second reason should be the reason for removal of the chimney and windows is a failure to maintain the building properly. Thus, paragraph 191 of the NPPF applies. That this is a situation that paragraph was written for. In the end, it doesn't prevent them if they can get permission from doing it, but they're going to have to justify it. Sorry, they're going to have to justify it. The Yeah, the conservation plan and the NPPF also. I'm going to read a third and a fourth out, if I may. The third is the applicant has not demonstrated by means of a dry rot survey and structural survey that the deterioration is so severe that removal of the chimney and windows is the only acceptable solution. Now, that is the level of test that really ought to be applied in a World Heritage Site. And the fourth one, I understand what James is saying, but actually, if you look down this end of the shopping street, UPVC is very much the exception. You go down the far end of Brook Street and things change, but at this end, it is very much the exception. So I suggest that the fourth one is the use of UPVC is, as set out in paragraph 2.5 of the Conservation Area Management Plan, not acceptable in the World Heritage Site and Conservation Area.
Okay, those of you who voted for this motion, are you happy with those arguments? Yep, okay, fine. And that's how it is.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, that brings us to the end of the new applications. You'll remember we had a rather disrupted meeting last time, but we were able to deal with the Mount Tavy Road application, and you've got in your paperwork there a summary of the outcome of that, and also the Chaucer Road application. There's no further business. Graham?
Just want to say congratulations, Chair. I think you got those three, particularly the Mount Tavy Road one that you pulled together, reads really very, very well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So that concludes the business for this evening, ladies and gentlemen, and the meeting is closed.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Cheers,
Well done.
everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Aye.